it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I'm looking forward to
Absolutely. Yeah,
getting into your world and your mission.
for
So thank you.
sure.
So let's begin this journey. And I know we're all getting tired of talking about it, but COVID was such a big deal. It affected so many things and the way we lived our lives. So I want to know, how did you survive that time period, and how did it influence the way that you do your work and live life now?
So literally, my entire story is COVID, I would say.
Yeah,
I was pre-COVID and um I had resolved to just be a business lady, right? Like I was just convinced that this was what I was going to do because that's how I was raised. Like you are going to go to school and you're going to go to college and you're going to get a degree and you're going to get a job and that's what you're going to do.
yeah,
And I I just never I just literally never considered that there were other options.
right.
I never thought about it. And my biggest fear in the entire world was everything falling apart. And for me, that was not having my job. And so I was an event planner. And in 2018, I started a buyout to buy the event planning company that I had worked for since I was 21. So, I mean, I never left and I never took a day off and I never stopped to think about what I was doing. And then of course COVID hits. I'm sorry, my dogs are
I love it. I was like, what's going on back there? I love it.
they're just wrestling
That's
the
good. I love
children
it.
right now.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Um, it's because I'm not paying attention to them and they're
Right,
trying to get my
exactly.
attention.
Yeah, they want your attention. I get it.
Um, and yeah, so I lose my job. I have no money. I have no identity, essentially, because I had resolved to be this person who
Yeah.
worked all the time. And it was the first time I was ever home by myself and had time to be with myself. And I mean, there was definitely months of crying and uh feeling like this was the end of the world. Um, but I was also spending a lot of time online, I think, as a lot of us were. I always say there's like two sides of COVID. You either had to work more and like got busier, or worked in a hospital, or worked in or you were at home for 2 years. And I was home, and I was consuming like 10 hours of content a day online.
Yeah.
And I really, I was really in a really hopeless place. I have depression and I have since always, but I got diagnosed at 19. And so it was kind of, I really needed a reason to get out of bed. And I had to make one for myself. And so I decided that I could do trends and stuff online. I could try to like play on the internet, and if nothing else, it was something for me to do. And so I started, and I mean, I instantly regretted not doing it sooner. I was obsessed. I mean, we all like validation, but at the same time, I just liked having an outlet. I've been a creative person my whole life, and I've never really done anything with that. It was like when you're a kid and people ask you what you want to be when you grow up, you're like, I want to be an artist.
Yeah.
And of course I got that squashed out of me quick. And so it was like the first time I was like stretching these creative muscles, and I was also creating community at a time when that wasn't, obviously we weren't in person community. So I I fell in love with it, and I was doing these. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a podcast, but I was doing these lives almost every day, and I created a game show called Wrong Answers Only Trivia Live. And this is like in the beginning of my content creation on TikTok. If you ever ask people, like now, they're like, I miss when you were small enough to do Trivia Live, and I'm like, I know. It was so funny.
Yeah.
But that really started the community, and then we also like went offline, and then I took these people from TikTok and we became a community on Discord, and it really was the first time in my life I had a group of like-minded people, a group of people who felt the same way I felt about life, And that was kind of like what I just kept posting online. And the more honest I got, the more the positive the feedback was. Like, I needed to hear this, or, I thought I was the only one, or all of these things. And I just kept talking. And what I did online was literally save my own life. I deconstructed everything I ever thought I knew, like 1 minute at a time for the last 4 years. And the person whose life I saved was mine, and I just got so lucky that I got to save other people's lives along the way. And it's all it's been a lot of saying yes and trying new things. After a while, somebody said you should have a live show, and I said, "What?" And so I did, and I've been touring the country for 2 years with a mental health comedy show, which is actually insane because if you were to go back to like 2019 and tell me like, hey, just so you know, 4 years from today, you're going to be touring the country with a show you wrote yourself, a one-woman show, and you stand up in front of hundreds of people for an hour uh, each night and do this, and you have millions of followers online, and you quit your job and you wrote a book, and out of nowhere you decided to start your own morning show. And all of that is crazy.
Yeah.
But COVID was like just such a detrimental time, but it changed my whole life. So it's that like eternally grateful, but no.
That's
Something came out of the flames. So
absolutely. Yeah. And for you, it opened the gates of Mordor. I mean, it's like, and that's the funny thing about life. Just like you said, we have this ingredient list of what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to follow through on this. But sometimes it takes a long time to find your voice because all of these elements existed in you. You just had to find the right way to align them together. And that's the beauty of stories like you, is that there's all these elements of unexpectedness minced with magic and minced with a dream that you never gave up on. And you take all of those and throw it into a blender and boom, you got something that 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you would have just been like, I don't know who you're talking about. It's not me.
yeah,
Right?
that's what other people do.
Right.
That's not what I do. Right.
Exactly. That's what the rest of the world does. So,
Yeah.
so I know you have this viral world. You're
Hmm.
performing. There's a level of self-acceptance you're helping people get to. But if we were to boil all this down to essential elements of what you do every day, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third grade students at career day,
Right.
and one of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?"
That's a good question. I create content to help people feel okay right where they're at. And that's essentially all that I do. I just do it in a bunch of different ways, but it is just creating media. It's media. I'm a journalist of sorts.
Yeah.
I'm a yeah,
And they would dig that because this is their medium. This is their
right.
canvas. You
Yeah.
know? That's
And they
that's what they do.
understand it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard too because it is making it up as you go along because this doesn't exist,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody who has decided to, blow up their lives and become a content creator on the internet, you also know that I'm going to have to be so adaptable because any one of these platforms can kick me off on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And, just knowing that and being aware and trying to keep them all afloat, like keeping the YouTube and the Facebook and the Instagram and the TikTok. And apparently there's some new one called Blue Sky. And and but being really adaptable in the way, it's also just kind of part of what I'm trying to teach people is like it's going to be okay. Everything can fall apart and you really can make up something new
Yeah.
and everything is made up. It all felt so set in stone to me. And now I say, I'm like, that like we blast apart stones. Like we we chop up diamonds into little shapes. Like something being set in stone isn't really a very good analogy
Yeah.
because it's very easy to unset something in stone.
Yeah.
And throwing away so much of of what you think you know. And
Yep.
I am always bummed that the people who are not willing to hear from me are young people. Uh, just because it's what I wish I knew.
Yeah.
And people will ask me like, "What's this book about?" And I'm like, "It's everything I wish that somebody had told me."
Yeah.
And but I did I have gotten like, in my personal life, like my cousin, she was trying to pick what college to go to, and this was 4 years ago now, and she was like, this decision is the end of the world. Like, what if I mess it up? And I like pulled her aside and I said, "Hey, everyone's gonna make you feel like this is so important." And I was like, "But I need you to know you can change your mind." Like, if you decide that what you choose isn't right, you can pick something else.
Yeah.
There's no there's no set path. The timeline's made up. All of it is it's just ideas that we have,
Yep.
but the road isn't really meant to be stayed on if you don't want to.
And regret is expensive. It's that whole Mark Twain quote. He didn't regret what he did with his life. He regretted what he didn't do. And if you
Yeah,
don't actually do it, my stepdaughter watched these two guys called the Dolan twins for a long time. You ever heard of them?
I have. Yes.
Okay, so I think about this. Like they were just a couple of guys that started on Vine. You remember Vine?
Yeah.
Okay, so they became Vine sensations, and they were twins, and they kind of look like models, but they were just doing their own thing, and they're good dudes. And she would
Oh,
always have my wife and I watch them at night. You got to see what they're doing, and they ended up getting to a point where they got serious, and I think now they're gone. They're like totally like
right.
severed themselves, but they were kind of doing the same thing. They were chartering this new reality where you can make revenue off of YouTube and all of these things, which was
Hmm.
pretty much what they were doing. But I find it fascinating, and especially for the older generations that knew what it was like before the internet, that knew what it was like before all these things, and we have this bridge and this more expanded vernacular of how all of this comes together. Um, so I'm curious. Obviously, since some of these things were a surprise that it materialized the way it did, take me back to your childhood and what were the essential seeds that were planted into you that allowed you to be a writer, to get on stage, to have a comedic vernacular, all of these things. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is I am very lucky. I am very privileged. I was raised in a middle class home where maybe like for a few years of our life we were struggling, but it was never, it wasn't, and I recognize that, like I always had access to what I needed when I wasn't fitting in regular school. I had the ability to switch schools. I was bullied so much, and so I switched to private school later in life, and but I was a voracious reader my whole life. Uh, and now I know a lot of that is undiagnosed ADHD, the way that I can't put down a book, can't stop reading, can't like my hyperfixation was so aggressive. Um, my dad, although he didn't do anything with it, he was an artist. And so I got a lot of that from him. We did a lot of like drawing and crafting and creating. On that creative side, just building, and we built a dollhouse together,
Wow.
and like just things like that in that way. Uh, where I had a lot of freedom to be creative, and I was always painting, and they let me do drawings and paintings to hang in our house, and like, oh, our plates and bowls, I painted them all
Nice.
in our house, and I had a lot of creative outlets as a kid, but they just kind of disappear once you get to that age where like, okay, now you have to be serious. And the reason that I can write, and I'm so grateful, is because I switched schools when I was being bullied, and I went to a school where their main focus was writing. Like, I don't know, and it is because it was a college prep school that their main focus was they wanted you to do well in college, and I don't know, they knew that the secret recipe was just that you needed to be well written. And so we had to take two English classes a semester, and it really was. And it's so funny. I've never talked about this. In ninth grade, I had this teacher, Mr. Schustbauer, and it was a creative writing class, and it changed the way my brain worked, I think, about about writing and putting words together and putting them down on a page and how they could be a lot simpler than we might think they need to be. Like we didn't need the big words. We didn't need to use a thesaurus. We didn't because you can get your point across in a unique and creative way with less.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because that's literally my whole platform now is taking these big scary topics like mental health and breaking them down into really digestible 2-second bits. And that's really where that started. But I don't know. I went into college and I went to business school and everything just kind of I just let it all go.
Yeah. So, who's been that hero for you that has fueled this dream and this fruition of this desire that you've had? Who has been that kind of inspiration for you?
Me.
Yeah, I like it.
Me. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things in my life I did on my own, and I know that's not always the best. Sometimes hyper independence is a trauma response to not feeling supported, and that's definitely true. When I was 19, I went into inpatient treatment for anorexia, and my parents tried to talk me out of that because they wanted to take care of it themselves. And I said, no, something's wrong with me and I need help.
Yeah,
And that was the first time in my life I said, no, I know what I need. I haven't spoken up, but I need to. Like,
yeah,
I'm not getting what I need and I'm going to get it for myself. And so I've always been that person for me. And I think it's a bummer. Like, every time something's gone wrong, I've been the person to save myself. And but I'm proud. I don't know where any of that came from. I'm always like, that was like some deep rooted bravery I had for 10 seconds and used. But I do like now, all I can ever ask of anybody in my life is be willing to learn and grow. And my parents have been on this journey with me the last 4 years, and they've really changed really alongside me. And um, the way they are proud of me now is everything. But even so, we have kind of like a disconnected relationship in the middle there. The other two people in my life who were instilling like this magic in me in different ways were my parents because my mom is the toughest, badass, scary, like but talented and impressive and an athlete and a doctor and never takes no for an answer. She was, on the front lines fighting for to get girls sports in schools when she was a kid. Like she is just this powerhouse, which, is tough as their daughter, but uh, the resilience and the just adaptability and all of that, was there. And then my dad is this like dreamer who has never even considered that no is an option, like for anything. And I think a lot of that's that he's a white man, but there's this other part of it, like he like me, you know, he started as an artist and then went back, got his degree in mortuary science and became a funeral director. Like, and then 7 years into that, he was like, no, I can't do this. And, just jumped ship and started his own business and went off on a limb. And I've always had that, I've always watched him exist,
yeah,
but never thought it was possible for me. But it is true when I get to these places in my life where it's like, can I jump into the unknown? And it's like, probably.
yeah. Yeah, you've had a good backbone there. So, of all the people, the one thing about COVID was it really illuminated mental health, and
Mhm.
it made it something where it's not like, oh, get over it. It's been taken more seriously. So, who exists on the planet right now that you admire that's overcome mental health, whether they're celebrities or otherwise, that you would love to talk to and meet?
Oh gosh. The problem is there's so many and we're gonna get
Yeah,
off and I'm gonna be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my
yeah,
God, oh my God.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, there's like always all the big ones like Maria Bamford and she's a comedian and we are very similar. And I didn't even know that she existed until people said that I reminded them of her and now I do. And she's one of those people like me who is just really honest about it, like doesn't make it seem fun, like it and just tells it like it is. Um, I I've been really lucky too in the creator space that I get to meet a lot of these people.
Yeah,
And so it's
for
almost
sure.
like I've met some of my heroes,
Uh-huh.
and that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Um, I I'm trying to think of who, like, a lot of them are comedians, I guess, which is good because I mean mental health the mental health to comedian pipeline is 2 inches long. And
Uh-huh.
because as I say in my shows, I'm like, how I ended up here, right? Trauma.
Yeah.
And I I think anybody who can be who they are really loudly and really honestly. I'm trying to think of who I'm thinking of. uh I mean, there's also like the Brene Browns of the world.
Sure.
I mean, they're making it possible that these are entire platforms of of people just being who they are. Tara Schuster, she is an author and kind of one of those other people who's just like paving the way for being exactly who you are
Yeah.
and throwing away the life you thought you needed to live. Um, this is,
S- Speaking of who you are, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, all of your fans, everyone that knows you, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you run the show. What's
hmm
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, that's a hard question. Who do I think
That
I am? I think
that
I'm a
could be
lot of
borderline
things.
therapeutic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like on my worst days, I'm an imposter in everything I do. And why me? How did I get here? None of this makes any sense. I'm not qualified to do any of this. Um, but on a good day, I am making it up as I go along. And I do live in a fantasy world where anything is possible and it is sunshine and rainbows. And I am that embarrassing girl who's like, no, you know what? I like bubblegum pop music and I want to wear pink and be really silly online. I fought being that person my whole life because I thought I had to be this serious, put together person. And now I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I'm a mess. And that's okay. That's who I am. I'm a mess and that's okay.
That's why I always thought it's so weird. Everybody gets so excited about Halloween and taking on these different personas. Why can't people elongate that out and do it longer?
I
You know
don't
what I'm
like
saying?
Halloween.
What's that?
Maybe I don't like Halloween.
Oh,
Maybe it's
okay.
because I'm a bad faker.
Yeah, right. There you go. That makes total sense. So let's celebrate Detroit a little bit here at the very
Yeah.
end. And what I want to do is I'm going to put a time machine in front of your house when we get off this call, and you can go anywhere in the history of Detroit's timeline as a city and see one event with your own eyes.
Oh my gosh.
Where are you going?
I want to go to a baseball game at I have never it existed when I was a kid, but I didn't go because I was young. But I've never been to Tiger Stadium, like the old Tiger Stadium.
I went there. It was
You
a trip.
did?
Yes. I went there
It
in
was like
nine.
so little and cute and like
You felt like you could fall off. I was all the way at the top. It was 93. And I just thought I was gonna, if I tripped and fell, I was gonna fall all the way down to the bottom.
oh
It
my
was the
gosh.
weirdest, steepest, but you smelt it. It was like Wrigley. There was the smell. The hot dog was perfect. There was a band playing like old school. Anyway,
I want to go to that day.
yeah, there you go. It was totally wild. It's so weird you say that, and I'm just kind of being bespeckled by Detroit, and I
It's
actually
definitely one of those things that, like, even when I drive by it now, I'm like, gosh darn
yeah,
it.
I know. Well, we're getting ready in Kansas City to get to that point. They're wanting to build a new stadium, so this old stadium, which is seen as one of the best in baseball, will be, outdated, and they'll do something to it. So I get the feeling. I totally
I
we
would also like to go because I think it was an away game, so it's not in Detroit. But when we were when the Red Wings were in the rivalry with the Colorado, that was the most aggressive time to be alive. Even
Yeah.
as a kid, you knew how serious it was.
Huh?
And I would have loved to be at one of those games
Yeah,
too.
that would be awesome. That would. So, if anyone out there wants to follow you, catch up, see you live, any of the good business in your world, where do
Yeah.
they go?
Everything lives at akprzy.com. Like that's where you can find every one of my handles, which is the same. It's at akprzy everywhere. Facebook, Threads, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. I have the
Everywhere.
same handle everywhere, which is great. Um, but yeah, you can travel with me. You can see me live. You can buy my book. All these things.
Okay. I love it. Anna, this has been so good. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I met you. Your story's wonderful. Keep doing the good work out there.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely.